Forget the clean documentary image of hot chow arriving on schedule. In late-war Soviet formations, food was often cold, late, or simply not where the crew was. Metal stayed wet. Hands stayed numb. Diesel smelled like everything. Regulations warned against flame near fuel and ammunition, and they weren't wrong. But crews still cooked because a warm meal can be the difference between functioning and failing. These are the 7 banned field cooking hacks Soviet tank crews used in World War II. Number 7. Cooking on tanks. Warm meals at the risk of disaster. Soviet technical discipline was clear about fire. Open flame around fuel, lubricants, and a loaded vehicle was treated as negligence, especially in cramped parks and staging areas where one mistake could spread fast. Crews were expected to eat from field kitchens or issued rations, not turn a fighting vehicle into a stove. But in 1945, on remote garrison duty and amphibious operations in the Far East, food wasn't always delivered. So crews used what they had: heat. Reports from the Kuril Islands mention meals warmed on engine decks and grates, metal already hot from driving, and flat enough for a mess tin. On some vehicles you could wedge a can near the exhaust outlet, then rotate it with pliers or a bayonet when it started to spit. It worked. Fast. Soup thawed. Bread softened. And sometimes it punished them. Fuel or oil seepage could ignite on a hot grill, and a flare-up on the engine deck meant panic, smothering flames with sand or a greatcoat while trying not to spread burning oil toward stowage. A hot meal came with a real, mechanical downside. Number 6. Unauthorized fuel use. Burning for heat in the cold and wet. Fuel accounting in the Red Army wasn't a suggestion. Diesel and gasoline were issued for movement and combat tasks, logged by the leader, and misuse could be treated as theft or sabotage. Crew instructions stressed ventilation and fire safety, because fumes in tight spaces could drop a man fast. But cold and wet changed the math. In field conditions, some crews and attached infantry used diesel as an accelerant-soaked rags, splashed onto damp wood, then lit to get a fire going when everything else was waterlogged. The 296th Rifle Division is linked in reports to this kind of practice. A practical shortcut when the choice was hot food now or no fire at all. The upside was immediate. Diesel burns longer than twigs. It pushes a flame through wet kindling. You can boil water even in miserable weather. The cost was real. Diesel smoke and unburned vapors can make a shelter unlivable, and an open pan of fuel near a vehicle meant one stumble could turn cooking fire into a spill fire. And every liter burned for warmth was a liter not available when the unit had to move. Number 5. Bartering with naval infantry. Trading for survival under strict rationing. On paper, rations were issued, recorded, and consumed by category. Deviations meant paperwork, suspicion, and sometimes punishment. Frontline units were supposed to live inside the system. No private trade, no swapping equipment, no informal markets inside a combat zone. In reality, units co-located with different services saw opportunities. In 1945, the 563rd Separate Tank Battalion is noted for exchanging tools and small arms odds and ends for provisions with nearby naval infantry. Not a grand conspiracy. Small, rational decisions. A tank crew might have spare track pins, a file, or a captured knife. The sailors might have access to different stores, better bread, or canned food. Morale improved because the diet improved. A hot, heavier meal can keep a driver steady and a gunner awake. But the risk wasn't theoretical. If a weapon went missing on inventory, or a tool mattered later, that trade became a discipline case. One unit could look well-fed while another went short, and resentment spreads faster than rumors. If you were in that crew, would you risk the punishment for the extra calories? Number 4. Improvised stove from shell cases. Creative engineering with explosive pasts. Soviet manuals were detailed about weapons, engines, and maintenance. They were not enthusiastic about unauthorized gadgets inside or near vehicles, especially anything involving heat. Fire safety instructions existed for a reason. Ammunition, fuel, and cramped sleeping arrangements don't forgive improvisation. Yet improvisation is what crews did best. The 18th Guards Tank Brigade is associated with a particularly direct solution: small stoves made from empty shell cases. Cut and vented, a casing could become a compact burner body. Feed it with wood scraps, charcoal, or even oily waste. Set it on a flat stone or a metal plate to keep it from sinking into wet ground. Now you have controlled heat for tea, porridge, and melted snow. The stove's efficiency was the point. Less smoke than an open fire. Faster boil, less time exposed. But the hazards came along for the ride. A clean casing might not be clean, and residue plus heat is a bad combination. Tip it over and you've got sparks into dry grass or into a dugout full of gear. It helped, until it didn't. Before we move on, if you had to pick one of these so far, what's your call? Engine deck cooking, diesel fires, bartering, or the shell case stove? Tell us why in the comments. And subscribe if you want the unromantic version of how armies actually functioned under pressure. Number 3. Stockpiling extra concentrates. Discipline said, 1 issue. Hunger said, 2. Officially, concentrates and dry rations weren't a personal savings account. What you drew was what you ate, logged through supply channels and tied to planning. How far you could move, how long you could wait for a field kitchen, how quickly a crew would fatigue. Hoarding looked like theft, or panic, but tank crews learned the same lesson over and over. Kitchens get shelled, trucks get lost, units outrun their own supply. So men pocketed the dense stuff. Sugar, tea bricks, hard biscuits, tinned meat when it appeared, even vitamin concentrates issued to fight exhaustion. The trick wasn't gourmet, it was control. A pouch tucked behind a seat cushion, a tin under a spare part box, anything that stayed with the vehicle when the column moved. Sometimes it saved the day. A driver with shaking hands can still function after hot tea and sugar, and a crew that can eat without waiting can keep the tank in the fight. Sometimes it cut the other way. A surprise inspection could turn prudence into punishment, and if everyone hid a little extra, somebody else simply didn't get fed. Number 2. Using captured Japanese food. Enemy calories, trusted by necessity. Regulations leaned hard against unknown food. Contamination, poisoning, sabotage. Commanders had reasons to be cautious, especially in new theaters where supply chains were thin and medical support lagged behind the spearhead. Captured stores were supposed to be inventoried and redistributed, not quietly consumed. But in 1945, moving through Manchuria and onto islands, you could find depots and abandoned kitchens before you found your own rear services. So crews improvised with what was there: rice, dried fish, soy-based condiments, canned goods with labels nobody in the crew could read. The method was blunt: smell test, small taste, then boil it hard. Mixed into porridge, it became familiar enough to eat. It worked when it was real food. Rice stretches, salt and fat fix morale. A crew that eats stays awake longer, and awake crews make fewer fatal mistakes. It failed when trust was guessed wrong. Spoiled stores can drop a crew with vomiting and dehydration, and a tank that can't move because the driver is incapacitated becomes a target with tracks. Number 1. Alcohol consumption for warmth. The oldest shortcut and the most expensive one. Soviet rules around alcohol were contradictory on purpose. There were periods of rationed issue, then clampdowns, then informal toleration, depending on commander, sector, and supply. What didn't change was the safety logic. Alcohol plus weapons, vehicles, and cold judgment was a known recipe for accidents. In practice, crews still drank for warmth and sleep. Not romance. Chemistry. Alcohol blunts shivering and fear, and it makes a wet coat feel less like a sentence. It could be standard issue vodka when it appeared, bartered spirits, or home brewed taken from civilians or captured stocks. A few mouthfuls, then back into the metal box. And if you were lucky, you slept. The worked part was real, short-term. Men relaxed enough to rest, and a crew that gets any sleep is less likely to break down mentally the next day. The bill came due later. Alcohol increases heat loss, dulls reaction time, and turns small maintenance errors into catastrophes: missed oil caps, sloppy refueling, a dropped match near fumes. That warmth can cost you the vehicle. Across all of this, the pattern isn't heroism or villainy. It's friction. Regulations describe an army that eats on schedule, burns fuel only for mission, and treats supplies like math. Crews lived inside weather, distance, and delay. So they bent the rules with small hacks that bought minutes of heat and hours of function and sometimes wrote their own penalties. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. We'll keep following the places where doctrine ends and real decisions begin.